So my name is Lena Grinsted. I'm a senior lecturer in zoology at the University of Portsmouth. When I started my job as a lecturer a couple of years ago, I was really keen to try to, I suppose, to make my teaching as inclusive and accessible as possible. So I started reading up a little bit on decolonizing the science curriculum. And then I started sort of slowly implementing some steps in my own teaching towards decolonizing my own teaching and delivery. And to be absolutely honest, it went horribly wrong. There was a real backlash from the students, and it was all in all very difficult and quite unpleasant. So that sort of made me sort of, oh yeah, I should also say that in dealing with all of this and talking to my colleagues about it, I felt that it was very sort of mixed responses I got from my colleagues and sort of mixed levels of support, I would say, and I sort of struggled to find anyone who could, in a way, mentor me through trying to make some positive changes in my teaching. I didn't find anybody to really get sort of inspiration and good ideas from. So that made me sort of wonder about the question of what are the sort of general attitudes of science teaching staff? So basically sort of my colleagues and other peers, what do they think about decolonizing the science curriculum? And what are their experiences with decolonizing the science curriculum? Are others running into the same sort of difficulties as I am? And what are the types of barriers that people perceive that might make them sort of hesitant to actually take any steps towards decolonizing the curriculum? I should maybe also just say that I have since then done some more reading, and I think at least improved the way I'm trying to decolonize my teaching. And now it's much better perceived by the students, but I'm still not at all an expert. I just want to sort of make that clear as well. So basically what I did was I distributed a questionnaire in my Faculty of Science and Health. So that covered sort of biology, geography, psychology, and pharmacy. And I ended up with 46 submissions from scientists all involved with teaching within my faculty. I'd like to also just sort of state my own positionality here. So I'm, of course, white. I'm from Denmark, so I grew up in Scandinavia. And I'm from a middle-class family. I'm female and I'm cisgender, so I'd like to just acknowledge that. I'd also like to just say that, of course, I am a scientist trained in sort of Western research methodology, so that's what I'm familiar with. So what I will present to you today are the sort of quantitative summary statistics where I'm trying to look for sort of trends and perceptions, right? So that's, and I'm not saying that's the right way to do things, but that's how I'm sort of trained to do, and that's how I know how to present my results. But together with my co-authors, Catherine Murgatroyd and Jody Burkett, we're also currently doing qualitative analysis of this data set. But I won't be presenting that today. So I'd like to start out showing you some results from particular teaching actions. So basically what I did was I presented sort of a very long list of things, really specific actions and activities that we can do in our teaching, not to decolonize, but at least in steps towards decolonizing the curriculum. And I divided all these activities into two separate types of actions. So one is actions completely without actually talking to students about racism, ethnicity, colonization. So it could be things like just simply include more global and diverse examples in our teaching, include a little bit about the historical development, about the topic, and diversifying our reading list. So we can, of course, do this and never even mention anything to our students about what we're doing and the fact that we've made changes. And then I listed a bunch of actions that include directly talking to students and discussing things like ethnicity, race, racism, directly talk to students about the fact that there's a huge overrepresentation of scientific contributions from white people, Western people, particularly white males, and discussions about who and who is not acknowledged for the great discoveries. And I'd like to just show you the results here. So what I'll be showing you here, the sort of average percentage response, basically. So so firstly, the first thing to note is that actually round about half of all participants actually already do a lot of these actions that don't necessarily include talking directly to students. So like diversifying the reading list. But when it then comes to actions where we directly discuss with students, that number drops down to about a third. So about 30% of participants directly talk to students about things like race and racism and these kind of things. But on a sort of, I think, quite positive note is that a further, almost a quarter of participants said, okay, I don't actually already do this, but I am prepared to do this now, you know, so maybe from now on, this is something I'll actually go and do in my teaching. And another sort of 10-20% of participants said, I am prepared to do that. I'd like to do this in my teaching, but I do feel like I need some training before I can actually and go and do these activities in my teaching, which is absolutely understandable, right? So there was very few participants that said they were uncomfortable, that they're just not comfortable doing these kind of things. Slightly more people uncomfortable about directly talking to students. And then very importantly, there was sort of 10-20% of participants that just didn't think it was relevant at all in their teaching, which I think is a little bit concerning, of course, because I find it difficult to think of any teaching where it's not relevant to decolonize, really. But just to point at sort of, or focus on the positives, because I like to try and focus on the positives, if we sort of combine all the responses of people that already tend to do things, are prepared to do it now, or prepared to do it after receiving training, we actually get nearly 90% of participants had a sort of positive disposition, positive attitudes towards decolonizing, or at least, I mean, you know, doing some steps towards decolonizing their own teaching. This, of course, drops down a little bit, but it's still a majority of science teaching staff that have a positive attitude towards this, but they might just need training before they feel comfortable doing it. But, you know, on the flip side, it's also really important that we don't forget that there is actually quite a sort of substantial minority of teaching staff that just maybe just don't see the point, right? And in pointing this out, I'm going to show you some written comments that I had to unfortunately go through in my in the submissions of some really quite sort of aggressive and hostile resistance to decolonizing the curriculum. So I'll just list these quotes. I'm not going to read them aloud because I think they're quite unpleasant. And I just want to say with this that these are just a few of them. I got more of these kind of really negative comments. And so I just want to point out that even though my study is showing that we do have a majority of teaching staff with a positive attitude, if we just have a few, even if all of these are just written by one person, if just one or two, or you know, a very small minority of teaching staff are really vocal and aggressive and hostile against any sort of change in this direction, that can feel like a completely unsurmountable barrier. It can feel like there's loads of resistance, even if it just comes from one or two people. So so that's why I feel like it's important to show that the majority is positive, even though at a sort of, emotional level, we can feel like it is just completely impossible sometimes. The next bits are some results from where I asked what people's perceived perceptions of what the benefits, the risks, and the barriers are associated with decolonizing the science curriculum. So I'll look at the benefits first. Again, I'm trying to stay positive. So I was really pleased to see that nearly 90% again agreed. So I should maybe say that I listed a whole boatload of suggested benefits and risks and barriers, and then I just asked people to sort of tick what they agreed with. And nearly 90% of participants agreed that there's a benefit to students of all ethnicities, okay? So not just minoritized, marginalized identities, but students of all ethnicities, that they can see themselves in their education and feel some level of ownership over the knowledge they learn. Additionally, another sort of 80% of participants agreed that decolonizing the science curriculum will prepare students of all ethnicities for a modern multicultural world, and also that it can help reduce inequalities, privilege, and entitlement in society as a whole. And I'd like to really point these two out, because I think this is really important to point out that actually the vast majority of teaching staff, in my case study here anyway, felt that not only does decolonizing the curriculum help help students in their education and making them feel a belonging to their education, but also it prepares everybody for the world beyond university, because university is obviously not just what we're doing in the moment, but it prepares students for society, right? So I think this was really positive. But of course, quite a few people also agreed with particular one, like the most agreed with risk that I'd like to point out here was that almost a quarter of participants felt that there was a risk associated with decolonization, that it might promote a cancel culture where we sort of censor out important content. And I think this is something really to focus on, because this is a misconception, at least in the way I understand decolonization. It's not about removing content. It's not about removing the scientific method like we were talking about before. It's about adding context, adding diversifying like we were talking about, and saying this is not the only way of thinking, and these are the reasons why we see overrepresentation of Western science in the curriculum. So it's not about cancelling out and taking things out of the curriculum. So this is an important misconception to look at. Of the most identified barriers, people identified a lack of training, and then, of course, not enough time, so lack of time, and then a lack of full understanding, which is related to lack of training. But they also sort of mentioned that the terminology is confusing, they're afraid of offending people, they don't know who to get ideas and advice from, and not enough support from leadership management. And these were all sort of between, so lack of training was 41% that said that, and then not enough support from leadership was 24%. So that was sort of the scale here. So just to summarize, that's a lot, by the way, there's a lot more results as well that I didn't have time to include. So hopefully this will get published soon in case you want to read about it. But in summary, I'd like to just point out like the really positiveness here, so that basically between 75 and 90% of staff felt positive about decolonizing their own teaching. They felt they benefit students of all ethnicities. They felt also, they said that teaching staff so themselves have a responsibility to decolonize the curriculum. They also said that their colleagues and management would benefit from training. But it's also really important to note that we really need open discussions. We need to talk to the students, we need to talk to each other, we need to have discussions and conversations about the historical biases that has led to this very biased and white curriculum that we have. So, and my results clearly show that there's some hesitation towards talking to students. People are much more likely to diversify the reading list rather than actually talking to students about racism and historical biases. And then, of course, there's these misconceptions about, taking things, censoring things out of the curriculum, which are really very prevalent. And then, of course, these barriers like lack of training and time. So conclude on that. Basically, I conclude in this study that training is needed. We need to train staff and management, but it's not just about training us in what does decolonization mean, what's the historical background, and what's correct terminology and all that sort of stuff. And it's so I should also mention that lots of excellent toolkits have been published that can help us look for particular types of activities and things we can do taking our teaching, which is fantastic, but it's not enough, because we can look at a list of activities to get inspiration, but what we also need is to feel confident and safe and comfortable talking to students about these things. And of course, as we've been talking about already, decolonization is about colonialism, which is about racism and slavery and genocides, and these are very emotional topics, right? And we need to be equipped with the right tools in order to handle these kind of emotional topics and talk to our students about it. And we need that confidence to create these safe spaces for non-judgmental discussions where everybody feels safe talking about these emotional topics. So we really need training in that as well. So I'd like to just finish by saying that only when we as teachers, as science teachers, feel comfortable openly discussing topics of race and colonialism, will we be able to break the cycle of inequality and empower all students with a feeling of belonging. Thank you very much. And I'm very happy to take if you have any questions afterwards, I'm very happy for you to contact me via email as well. I'll leave my email up here. Thank you.